Welcome. I'm Céline Pajon. I'm head of Japan research at the IFRI Center for Asian Studies, and I will moderate this session today. And so our topic is a very topical and very interesting and rich one. It's about the Taiwan-US-Japan triangle. And as you may know, we chose this topic as we have been witnessing rising tensions in the Taiwan Strait since at least last years, with more assertive moves from Beijing, but also greater tensions between and frictions between Beijing and both Taipei and Washington. And indeed, under the Donald Trump presidency, the US started to signal more clearly its commitment to supporting and defending Taiwan. And this trend seems to be continued under the leadership of Joe Biden. In recent months, Tokyo has also shown a more visibly engaged commitment to ensuring the peace and stability in the Taiwan Strait, and we saw several declaration, statement, reference to it, not least in the Suga-Biden joint statement back in April, but also in the latest Japanese defense white paper that was released this summer. So this webinar aims to explore these recent trends, analyze the strengths of the ties between the three actors, and also the implication for the future of the stability across Taiwan Strait and more broadly for the peace and security in the region. And to do so, I think we are very fortunate to have an impressive panel of experts with us. First, we have Dr. I-Chung Lai. Is the president of the Prospect Foundation, which is a Taiwanese independent, non-profit, non-partisan think tank. Prior to joining the foundation, Dr. Lai held a number of positions within the Democratic Progressive Party, including as executive director of the DPP's mission in the United States and a special assistant at the Taipei Economic and Cultural Representative Office in Tokyo. So he's very well placed to provide a Taiwanese Taipei's point of view on what's going on, an assessment, the first assessment of Biden's Taiwanese policy, maybe, and an assessment of the evolving relations with Japan. The second speaker that we will have is Dr. Shin Kawashima. He is a professor of international relations at the University of Tokyo, and he has an impressive academic career, and is also regularly invited to join advisory panels to the Japanese government. He is one of the most knowledgeable experts in Japan on the Taiwan-China issues, and he has published a number of books, his latest being Japan-China Relations in the Modern Era, and I believe it was published in Japanese language back in 2017. And Dr. Kawashima will explain the Tokyo's perspective and provide his assessment over the latest development, especially can we speak about a change really in the Japanese posture vis-à-vis Taiwan, or rather a kind of continuity. So we'll discuss that. And last but not least, we welcome J. Michael Cole. He's now based in Taipei and has a rather impressive number of hats that I will not detail today, but his main positions are being a senior fellow with the MacDonald Laurier Institute in Ottawa. He is also a senior fellow with the Taiwan Studies program at the University of Nottingham, senior fellow with the Global Taiwan Institute in Washington, D.C., and is the chief editor of the website Taiwan Sentinel. He has been working and publishing extensively on the Taiwan issue, and his latest book is Cross-Strait Relations since 2017, The End of the Illusion, that was published with Routledge last year. And so Mr. Cole is a close observer of the US Taiwanese policy and will provide his analysis of the latest developments in the US approach to Taiwan, both maybe under Trump and the Biden administration. And we will look at also the change and the continuity into that. And so before we start, let me remind you that this webinar is public, is on the record, and later on the video will be posted on IFWE website if you want to watch it again, or if you cannot stay until the end of the discussion. You are welcome, of course, to raise your question to our panelists, and to do so, please write down your questions into the Q&A box, and I will do my best to collect them and to direct them to our speakers. So I talked too much already, and I'm sure you're all eager to hear our panelists and to start the discussion. So without further ado, I would like to give the floor first to Dr. Lai for approximately 10 minutes presentation. So Dr. Lai, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Celine, for inviting me for this. I believe that's a very important topic in the conversations. Of course, with the recent development by the Biden administrations and the phenomenon of the so-called internationalization of the Taiwan Strait security issues, the presence of the U.S.-Japan, Taiwan, the trilateral relationship started to get noticed. But my experience is that this trilateral engagement or relationship and actually started at much earlier. Around the 1996 and onward. And ironically, it was actually the first Taiwan Strait crisis in which China fired missiles at the Taiwan's first presidential election, tried to scare up Taiwanese people or show Chinese anger about the democratic election in Taiwan. That crisis started to make people realize that the real problem about the Taiwan Straits that could exist, and with the militarization of the Taiwan Straits, then the issue about how the U.S.-Japan Alliance, its role in the Taiwan Strait security, started to put into the question, and thus the triangle begin. But the triangle at that time, when it begins, is actually the initiative from Taiwan. That is the then President Lee Teng-hui. In his initiative, he worked with, at that time, the United States, through some of the track too, but also the some officials' participations. For the United States at that time, that it was the Armitage. He was not at the government, but the U.S. also have the official presentation that is now the Indo-Pacific coordinator in the National Security Council, Kirk Campbell. He was the Deputy Assistant Secretary for the Defense, rather junior staff official, but he participated. Probably he is probably the only U.S. official participate in that the so-called Track 2 dialogue. In Japan at that time was actually spearheaded or organized by then the Senator Shinamoto. He was a very close friend of the then Prime Minister Hashimoto at that time. So he helped to get the Japan interested retired officials, scholars. Some people said that there are actually some officials sitting in the meeting, but I do not know. But this is how they come up with the Japan team. But from Taiwan, it's all official. So it's from the President Lee Teng-hui, his National Security Council, even some senior member in the government. They participate in those meetings. The meetings sometimes they happen in the United States, sometimes in Japan. And so basically it is discussions. And one of the driver for the meeting was that if you look at the 1996 Taiwan Strait crisis, Japan at that time, Hashimoto Prime Minister, according to the famous journalist Fubanashi in his book Alliance Adrift, he mentioned about the Hashimoto, his own concern at that time, knowing that China is going to fire missile near Taiwan, although it's not going to land at Taiwan. The Hashimoto at that time was so worried about how to evacuate the Japanese officials, Japanese nationals in Taiwan. And it was mentioned that there are more than 10,000 or even closer, a little bit more than that, that to him is a very big undertakings. And so that sort of the making cannot sleep at night. At another time, another issue was that the United States later decided to send two aircraft carrier battle group, and one of them coming from Japan as part of the Seventh Fleet. But Japan was not noticed. Just Japan wasn't notified beforehand, and so Japan basically was sort of the walking blind, not knowing what the United States is going to do about Taiwan. And of course, everything then ended up beautifully. The crisis ended, but then precisely due to this episode, the people in Taiwan, the Lee Teng-hui's government, believed that we really need to pay attention and have a dialogue with the U.S.-Japan alliances. And the Japan side at that time believed that all those problems about the evacuation of Japanese nationals, as well as how the United States is going to do through the U.S.-Japan alliances, those are the things that the Japan really need to know. And the U.S., of course, they also have their own reasons. But I have to say that even with those initiatives, it still was sort of outside the margin. This is not the mainstream thinking within both Japan and the United States policy communities. That is, the Taiwan Strait issue was still discussed and thought of in the framework of the U.S., Taiwan, China, the trilateral relations. The U.S.-Japan Alliance possible involvement, only the alliance manager for both in Japan and the United States were contemplating the possibilities about it. But about the real management and how the relationship should be going is still thought of through the U.S., Taiwan, and China. This conventional known the dispute triangles. And then come the year 2000 when the DPP came in. The DPP came in with the thinking that the DPP at that time was very familiar with the United States, but had almost zero experience about Japan. So they came in. The good thing is that they came in with a fresh plate, and the thinking about Japan at that time was that for Taiwan to be able to up relation with Japan, we really need to go to with who what kind of issue and who are the person that Japan decided Japan foreign policy. And it was understood that the U.S.-Japan Alliance was the one that Japan is through U.S.-Japan Alliance. Japan decided many of its own foreign policies. And then the thinking in Taiwan, DPP government, then was how to make Taiwan relevant to the U.S.-Japan alliances. And not just about the crisis management, but also in terms of how the relations between Taiwan and Japan and Taiwan-US, how that could go. And there's also another important factor in it is that there was this kind of experience by the Korean officials about how Taiwan has been subjugated to the relation with China, whether that's a U.S.-China relation, Japan-China relations. And for Taiwan to be able to really to break the glass ceilings, we need to be able to engage with the top priority of Japan's concerns, so that to make Taiwan relevant to that. So one thing about this is that the effort has been made by Taiwan, whether a Taiwan official in Japan and also to a lesser extent the Taiwan official in the United States, to try to engage systematically with the U.S.-Japan Alliance. So Japan's alliance manager and also the U.S. alliance manager. So that was during the year 2000 when the DPP was thinking about Taiwan-Japan relations. And I think it is precisely due to that effort, although the U.S., Taiwan, Japan, the triangle still wasn't really functional, but at least it started to register in both United States and Japan's people's mind about how to utilize this triangle and how relevant this triangle will be able to provide the services for both the Japan, Taiwan, and U.S.-China relation, as well as in the Taiwan Strait crisis, how the trilateral relation is important in having its footprint. So that one of the results is that DPP came in year 2000 with zero experience about Taiwan-Japan relations. But precisely due to this triangle endeavor for these triangular relations, the DPP was able to work out in year 2008 that knowing that Taiwan-Japan relation has much improved, and actually probably in comparison with the Taiwan-US relations, which was on the radar at that time, the Taiwan-Japan relation was actually one of the very few bright spots of the DPP foreign policy achievement at that time. And then, through that, that also brings out the when the Japan equation as part of the input in the issue of Taiwan Straits, the Chinese reaction will also come in. So that from year 2008 to year 2016, when Manchu government, in their management about the Taiwan-China, the cross relationship, in addition to what Manchu wanted to call the 92 consensus, we also noticed another practices was that whenever the Taiwan met the problem with China, what Taiwan did, the Manchu government did, was to beat up Japan, or trying to show that the Taiwan and the US and China, they're on the same page vis-a-vis the experience about Japan, as a way to improve the Taiwan-China relations. And I think that practices started to make successive Japanese officials and the government realize that, of course, they come up with the impression that Manchu is a pro-China president, which is true. Manchu has shared more common with China than with Japan, and that could also that also to a certain extent is true. But I think it is dynamics that Manchu decided to beat up or use Japan in order to salvage to save the whatever had really been wrong in the Taiwan-China relations. So that is another development after those 8 years in year 2016. Of course, DPP coming in year 2016 again. What we have about the China and the Japan relation is very different from Manchu, and of course our view that also been complicated by what we believe the Taiwan history before 1945, how that should be correctly positioned in Taiwan's overall foreign policy thinking. That also contribute to what we should do with Japan, because I think one of the very important differences, which I also hope that Japan could understand, is that in year 2002, DPP by itself launched a rethinking about the Taiwan-Japan relations. And in many of the contentious issues, such as historical textbooks, some of the history issues and between Taiwan and Japan, and even the Yasukuni Shrimps controversy, the DPP specifically take a very different approach. And at that time, the DPP's reason was that since Taiwan and Japan, we are both democracies. So for those controversies, it is for Japan's community and in society to decide what Japan should face with those. And what we do know from Taiwan, especially from DPP government, is that after the World War II, it ended up over 70 years, Japan was already a peace-loving country. Japan is a democracy, and so that we are not going to bind ourselves the relation with Japan because of what happened 7 years ago. And not to mention, at that time, Taiwan was part of Japan. So this development and the change in attitude by the DPP government sort of started to dictate and as a guideline for successive DPP's policy toward Japan. And that is in addition to the so-called realistic security calculus. There's a fundamental thinking within the DPP about how we should look at ourselves and our relation with Japan. And that thing, I think that should be really pay serious attention to. Now, quickly forward to current environment. Of course, I will say that the Biden administrations, through the effort of internationalization of the Taiwan Strait securities, so that this Taiwan Strait security not only got the US-Japan summit statement in it, but also yes, been input in part of the G7, whether that's a summit and also the ministerial statement, even the US and the EU summit statement. But I also noticed that even for Japan started to take this also on its own hand, that by having this between Japan and Australia 2+2 statement, as well as the Japan and the EU statement, so that the so-called internationalization of the Taiwan Strait securities and this issue becoming international concerns is not just about the U.S. initiative. Japan also started to play a very important role in making this known that it's a global concern, and the country should take a stand in this issue here. So I think this is another very important dynamics when we talk about the US-Japan Alliance in its possible material assistance to Taiwan, the diplomatic endeavor also by Japan and United States that also change, I would say, the global recognitions and the acknowledgement about how the Taiwan issue should be discussed and how the Taiwan security should be paid attention to. That is a very new development, and that also deserves a very serious attentions. As for the future, how the U.S.-Taiwan-Japan trilateral relation will go, I think probably there are two angles. One of them is that in terms of the Taiwan Strait securities, that something really happens. How the U.S.-Japan Alliance will respond, whether that is in a wartime and also in the gray zone. That is a peacetime, but not so peaceful time, but that is under the threshold of the full military contingencies. Another is about the Taiwan's international participations. That how the U.S.-Japan play a role in assisting and also transforming the Taiwan's international engagement in atmosphere. And that will come back to started to change and also have an influence about the bilateral relation between Taiwan and the U.S. and Taiwan-Japan. For example, the recent CPTPP, the Taiwan's applications. I would say that although the Chinese application surprised Taiwan, but the Chinese application to a certain extent also provide the text for the government to persuade the people in Taiwan that we need to apply for the CPTPP. And since CPTPP is such a free trade agreement, we have to obey the international standard so that some of the bilateral restrictions by Taiwan on Japan, for example, on Japan's the food surrounding the Fukushimas, and also for Taiwan's ban on the some possible U.S. pork, for example, in the referendum, that they gave the government more momentum and reasoning, trying to persuade the populace about the need to resolve those issues. Of course, how this issue will come out, that depends on the vote and also the dynamics, and probably later this year. But I think right now, at least, it provides the new momentum for the to move forward in those issues. So this is another areas I think that is also worth notifying. So I'll just end my presentation here, and thank you. So I'm just listening to others. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Dr. Lai. I think it was indeed very useful that you provide the historical background to this kind of triangle, and you explain how Taiwan tried to frame its relation with Japan also within the overall framework of the U.S.-Japan relations, and also how you describe the kind of realistic security calculus that the DPP is now developing vis-à-vis Japan. I think it raised a number of questions, of course, that we will need to discuss thereafter. One question that I have is how the territorial disputes between Japan and Taiwan is now affecting or not the relation and cooperation, or is it part of the realistic security calculus that the DPP just put that aside to prioritize the cooperation? What are the expectation in Taiwan regarding the next prime minister, incumbent prime minister in Japan, Mr. Kishida? And of course, we will discuss with Dr. Kawashima and Mr. Cold how the US-Japan Alliance can cooperate in case of gray zone situation around Taiwan, and how to handle the Chinese and Taipei's application to the CPTPP. I think that's a very important question indeed. So now I'm turning to Dr. Kawashima for his presentation. So I will. You have some slides. So I will.
Thank you so much. Dr. Lai's presentation is so insightful and it's very, very comprehensive, including Japanese standpoint. So my presentation can be skipped, but I focused on the Japanese standpoint or the Taiwan relation, the Taiwan Strait problem. Yeah, please next page. My presentation about the Japan's policy toward Taiwan. So at first, everybody said the one phrase, okay, the importance of peace and stability across the Taiwan Strait, as the moderator said. Yeah, when PM Suga visits Washington D.C. to meet with President Biden and announce the joint statement after the meeting, yeah. And every media reported that this phrase, the importance of peace and stability across the Taiwan Strait, meant the change, the Japan's or US-Japan policy toward Taiwan Strait, and also said that this phrase has not been used in these 50 years. Okay, 50 years ago, 50 or 51 or 2 years ago, in 1969. PM Satoru Eisaku and President Nixon, their meeting, they used the phrase and the statement, a joint statement of them. Yes, that's right. Yeah, so the prime minister, top meeting level, at the joint statement, they used this phrase, the importance of peace and stability across Taiwan Strait. Yes, it's so irregular. That's right. However, yeah, I'll say later. Next page. Yes, and 2+2 meeting, okay, at the LDP, Japanese LDP and Taiwan DPP. Yeah, this is also a bookmaking, that's right. Inside the ruling LDP 2, the centered on this, it's Defense Committee, 国防委员会 国防委员会 in Japanese, 国防委员会 in Chinese, and the Foreign Affairs Committee, 外交委员会 in Japanese, 外交部会 in Chinese. Voices have grown louder, positively pressing for preparation, okay, preparedness in the case of the Taiwan incident, Taiwan USJ. Strengthening this position on August 27th, the first time 2+2 diplomacy and security meeting occurred between the LDP and Taiwan ruling Democratic DPP. Okay, yes, it's also bookmaking. So the phrase Taiwan, the peace and stability of Taiwan Strait, and the 2+2, these facts, okay, provides some possibility that Japan changed its policy toward Taiwan Strait or Taiwan itself. Yeah, so many media and many scholars, many experts pointed out this point. Next page, please. But I'd like to propose one point. Are those new? Is it really new? The importance of peace and stability across Taiwan Strait has not been used in these 50 years at this level, the summit level, joint statement. That's right. However, it is often used. This phrase is often used at US-Japan 2+2 meeting, okay, and other meetings between a Japanese prime minister and other US leaders. For example, US-Japan 2+2 meeting in 2005, and also Koizumi Susan Rice meeting in the 2005 and others. So at the writing the statement, joint statement, okay, between Suga and Biden in this year, Japanese officials, diplomats, are not conscious that they adopt a new policy on Taiwan. Japanese officials said that at Washington, D.C., U.S. officials required much more positive toward Taiwan issues, but Japan did not accept such a proposal. So they only adopt the stability and on the Taiwan Strait. Okay, that's right. Secondly, 2 + 2, yes, it's epoch making at the point that both party talks on the security and diplomacy. That's right, it's epoch making. However, it's not government relations, government level, but just party to party meeting. So we can say that it is just under the framework of 1972 system, a framework that adopted the Sino-Japanese normalization in 1972. Please, next page. What is the 1972 system, a 1972 framework? As you know, Japan and the PLC was normalized in 1972. Okay, at that time, on September 29th in 1972, Japan and PLC announced the joint statement, joint declaration. Okay. This declaration said that the government of People's Republic of China, PLC, insists that Taiwan is inalienable part of the territory of the Republic of PLC. The government of Japan fully understands and respects this stand of government of PLC, and it firmly maintains its stand under the Article 8 of the Potsdam Proclamation. So this is the principle, what's called Japanese 1972 framework. So I think Japanese government keeps this framework until now. At present, the Japanese government does not change it. Like the U.S. government also does not change the one-China policy. U.S.-China one-China policy. Please, next page. Then Japan does not change the Japanese policy toward Taiwan? Really? Actually, it is Japanese impression. Japan changed its Taiwan policy in 2010s, especially after 2011. Okay. This change was also advanced under the 1972 framework or system. As you know, and when the big earthquake occurred in 2011, Taiwan donated to Japan so much, and the Japanese people really understand and really appreciate Taiwan people's donation toward Japan. So this new situation pushed Japanese government, both DPJ and LDP, to change its Taiwan policy. Okay, and especially Noda and Abe, both two conservative positions, advanced the friendship policy toward Taiwan. So the Japan and Taiwan solved a series of problems to conduct it and to get the new result, like investment agreement, fishery agreement, open sky agreement, tax agreement, and so on. Okay, those agreements were signed under the Ma-In-ju and Abe. That's right. Yeah, Professor Lai, Dr. Lai also mentioned these agreements. That's right. It's probably the President Ma-In-ju utilized Japan, or we can say that because the Ma-In-ju has had good relations with China, PLC, Beijing. So Beijing did not claim the Ma-In-ju diplomacy towards Japan. But anyway, Japan and Taiwan got a serious result after 2011. And also, Professor Abe he really expected to advance much more the relationship with Taiwan. And there's he and his brother, Mr. Kishi, the Minister of the Defense now, they also expected the advancement of the relationship with Taiwan after the 2016, when Mr. Taiwan became the president of Taiwan. Unfortunately, the Fukushima food problem that they also, like Professor Lai mentioned, Fukushima food problem happened. So, and also Japan requires the 2 points required to President Taiwan to solve the 2 points. One is about the Okinawa-Torishima issue, because the President Ma-in-chu said that as the final 1 month, 2 months, he suddenly said about the Okinawa-Torishima is not an island, just a rock. So it's rock does not have any EEZ. But Japan claimed it. So Japan requires Taiwan to solve this point, and also the Fukushima food problem. President Taiwan, proposed the processes to solve this Okinawa-Torishima issue. However, yes, we know the Fukushima food problem is so sensitive in Taiwan. Afterward the referendum also. So the unfortunately, Abe did not advance the relationship with Taiwan much more. At that time, Prime Minister Abe prepared to start the FTA negotiation with Taiwan. Yes, also the very, very, very unfortunate situations. So the Fukushima food problem is a big issue between Taiwan and Japan after 2016 or 17. However, in 2019, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Mr. Taro Kono, he's just a candidate for the president of LDP, the election. Taro Kono aimed to change this negative atmosphere, announced that Japan can support Taiwan's participation in WHA. And also, under this line, Japan decided to support Taiwan's participation in WHA after the COVID-19. And also, Japan decided to donate the vaccine, AstraZeneca, to Taiwan this year. So the vaccines donation from Japan to Taiwan is decided under this line: Taiwan's donation to Japan, Japan's back to Taiwan, because Japanese have to appreciate Taiwan's donation, because it is 10 years anniversary of the big earthquake this year. Okay, this page, please. Then nothing changed, really? Yes, I think actually the Japanese government still keeps the 1920s 22 framework. However, atmosphere is changing now. This is Mr. Aso, a very, very famous politician. Okay, he was the prime minister, deputy prime minister, and the minister of foreign finance, Aso Taro. He said about Taiwan suddenly, July 5th. Okay, he said, if Taiwan were to experience a big problem, it would be not be too much to say that it could lead to the survival threatening situation for Japan. This is some legal word in Japanese law. Okay, but this phrase means if Taiwan having some problem, Japan can support U.S. Navy or Army, U.S. military service to support Taiwan. He said the point. Okay, and it's a big point. This is a big announcement, because he is the deputy prime minister. Please, next page, please. Yes, this is the legal background, which is so complex, so I skip it. Please, next page, please. The next day of the Aso's announcement, the Kato Katsunobu, the cabinet secretary in the Suga administration, he remarks were not at odds. So Japanese government does not change its policy. However, next day, also said again, there's another remark. He said, which Japanese government is? He said, it's so interesting. There is another interpretation as those remarks. This is a point also made about the Japanese government having to consider various things. This remark shows that there has not been sufficient simultaneous regarding or considering about Taiwan incident. Japanese government does not consider deeply on this point. When the Taiwan Strait happened anything, what Japan can do? What can Japan do? Japanese government rarely considered the point. Japanese government rarely made any simulation. Also, the statement meant that Japanese government probably does not do such a simulation and others. Please, next page. So, what's the new situation? Japanese politicians start talking necessity to consider discuss various cases in Taiwan officially. Oh, this point maybe disappoint Mr. Lai, maybe. Japanese, not at the frontier, Japanese CGP back. But it is a big change. Yeah, recently, Japanese officials and politicians did not talk about this point officially. But recently, there is emerging a new atmosphere. The LDP's politicians and officials start talking about this point. I don't know the Mr. Kishida is Taiwan policy. However, we can prospect that Kishida-san is a little bit modest person. He maybe adopt the solid policy and continue the Abe-Suga line, I think. However, we have to pay attention to the personal matters in LDP. At first, Mr. Nikai's position. If Mr. Nikai will leave his position and other conservative politician gets the Nikai's position, the situation will be changed. Because recently in LDP, there are so many conservative politicians, they propose so many hardline policies toward PLC. However, Nikai-san stopped such a proposal. So LDP's situation, LDP's personnel matter is so important. And the next one, the election of the lower Congress. If the Jiminto LDP cannot get the great victory, it's a problem because if Japan LDP cannot get the victory, Komeito party's power will be increased so much. Komeito will adopt the much more pro PLC policy. It's possible. So it's still vague. However, we can proceed with something. If you have any question, I can answer about the so-called TPP issues and the Japanese attitude and so on. Maybe, but anyway, the CPP, TPP issues is a good chance for Japan because Japan cannot break down the regulation of CPTPP. So welcome PLC and Taiwan will join it. Okay, Japan basically a friendship with Taiwan. PLC, okay, if you can, solve the series of problems, the national enterprise and so on, it will be welcome. But if you have any question to about the CPTPP, we can listen. So USA use the climate change to make conversation with China, or Japan can make conversation on the topic of the CPTPP. It's a chance for us. Okay, I ended my presentation. Thank you so much.
Excellent. Thank you, Dr. Kawashima. Your connection was unstable from time to time, but we got your point. So thank you for underlining the very consistent approach, very consistent posture of Japan vis-à-vis Taiwan, and also explain about the change of atmosphere and to put into context the declaration that we heard from Taloaso and others. And this also is raising several kind of questions. One is how do you explain the quite mild reaction from China at some point, because China has reacted with strong words but no economic sanctions, no further kind of move. So how do you explain that? And you said that that Japan did not accept a more ambitious statement in the joint communique with the US. So I'm wondering if that point to a kind of different assessment of maybe the risk of a conflict of the Taiwan Strait between Japan and the US, or different understanding of what Japan can do in case of a conflict or a gray zone situation, a very serious situation there, and what the US has in mind. And so to follow up on this and then other questions, and now I'm turning to J. Michael Cole for his presentation, and then we will start the discussion part. So the floor is yours, Michael.
Thank you very much, Ms. Pajon, for inviting me to this timely panel. It's a little bit of a challenge to follow up on the excellent presentations by Dr. Lai and Dr. Kawashima, but I will do my best to perhaps add a little bit of my own views and fill some gaps in our discussion on that trilateral relationship. Well, first off, I would argue that the current state of relations between the U.S., Japan, and Taiwan is inarguably the best that it has, possibly ever been. And I would add that this is largely thanks to, behavior by the People's Republic of China, which has had a unifying effect on all those countries involved, and many more worldwide as well, not just the three countries that we're discussing today. Particularly on matters pertaining to regional security and defense of democracy, I think, again, Chinese behavior has compelled those countries to work more closely with Taiwan, also to reassess its value to the international community. So as long as this type of behavior continues in Beijing, and it doesn't look like it's going to cease anytime soon, we can certainly expect a continued deepening of that trilateral relationship. Attitudes toward China in the United States have changed, as we certainly have known for quite a few years, but they've also changed in Japan. And in many ways, those reflect the shifts that we've seen worldwide as well. Different opinion polls have demonstrated that there is a across-the-board hardening of views vis-a-vis China, and this has tended to be accompanied by a softening stance towards Taiwan and realization that it has things to contribute to the international community and certainly to countries within the region. Now, that shift began earlier with the Japanese government, but as we also know, it had been slow with the Foreign Service in Japan being historically having tendencies to be a little bit more pro-Beijing, if you will, and oftentimes serving as an impediment to rapprochement with Taiwan. But interestingly, in recent years, public views among Japanese toward China, and by rebound towards Taiwan, have also changed, with greater support now for Japanese involvement in the Taiwan Strait. Now, in the past, Japanese officials would oftentimes tell me that Tokyo wanted to first have good relations with Beijing before it could work more closely with Taiwan. So this appeared to be a little bit counterintuitive, but that was how the Japanese Foreign Service saw the possibilities in the Taiwan Strait. Obviously, that no longer is the case. In other words, Tokyo no longer waits for its relationship with Beijing to improve before it could do more with Taiwan. And here again, I would emphasize that we have China's behavior to thank for this, particularly China's behavior under Xi Jinping. Now, quite tellingly, according to a Nikkei opinion poll that was released in late April this year, 74% of the people in Japan support engagement in the Taiwan Strait, and only 13% of respondents were opposed. Now, we would need more clarity on what they mean by engagement, but nonetheless, I think these are extraordinarily telling figures about shifting attitudes towards China and Taiwan. I think quite interestingly as well, and this has been mentioned by both speakers earlier, Japan's more assertive policy on Taiwan, its willingness to be more vocal on national security and all that, not only has occurred at the bilateral level, i.e. between Japan and Taiwan, or Japan and the United States when discussing Taiwan, but also in other settings that involved Japan, such as a 2+2 bilateral with Australia, and the one with the European Union, where stability in the Taiwan Strait was mentioned. As has been said, Japanese government is now much more outspoken about Taiwan, about the Taiwan Strait, and the importance of Taiwan's sovereignty to Japan's national defense. The shifting attitudes in Tokyo do not, in and of themselves, fully account for Japan's greater outspokenness about Taiwan. I think here that US leadership is also necessary, as are calls by Washington upon Japan to do more of its own lifting in the region, particularly now that the United States is, very much admitting that it no longer has sufficient capabilities to meet all contingencies on its own when it comes to Chinese expansionism in the Indo-Pacific. Interestingly, Beijing has also been aware of and has even acknowledged that shift in Tokyo's relationship with Taiwan, which it now basically says that Tokyo is playing the quote-unquote Taiwan card, which is now a new normal in Japan-China relations. There was an editorial earlier this month on the CGTN website, which said, and I quote, Tokyo has kept hyping up the Taiwan question over the past months, barely hiding its intention to provoke Beijing, which regards the island as a purely domestic issue. Analysis shows that that behind the new approach lies Japan's domestic politics and its alignment with the US administration's China threat inflation. Japan's repeated flirtation with the Taiwan question has sent its relations with China to the lowest point since 2012, when the Japanese government announced the nationalization of the Diaoyu Islands, setting off strong protests from China and plummeting ties into a new cold winter. So these are quite strong words in that editorial on CGTN, but I do maintain that that reflects perceptions in Beijing of the state of relations between both Japan and Taiwan, but also between Japan and China. Now, what remains to be seen, and that is one of the big questions following the more vocal pronouncements by senior Japanese officials, is the extent to which Japan would be willing to involve itself in a military contingency in the Taiwan Strait. Many analysts argue that Tokyo would agree to play a support role for US intervention, but that it would not directly involve itself in combat in the Taiwan Strait. Beyond that, perhaps a future indicator of a closer military relationship between Japan and Taiwan would be, for example, for Tokyo to have an actual defense attaché based in Taipei, rather than a retired officer from the JSDF, as is currently the case. Now, I think it's also important to bring in the domestic factors in Taiwanese politics and their impact on that trilateral relationship. The vibrancy of that relationship is contingent, very much contingent, I would say, on the nature of the regime in Taiwan, which party is actually governing. Now, there's a long history of close ties between the DPP and Japan, again, for historical reasons, but also for ideological reasons. a return of the KMT to power in Taiwan, for example, in the next elections in 2024, would, in my view, inevitably affect this relationship, as Taiwan would very likely then become more Japan skeptic, as we saw under the Ma Ying-jeou administration, for example. It would be likely to revive and perhaps even escalate the territorial dispute over the Senkaku-Diaoyu ties in the East China Sea, and would also be very likely to seek closer ties with Beijing. So again, that would compel some reactions, not only on the part of the government in Tokyo, but also in Washington, D.C. as well. The recent elections for KMT chairman this past weekend, we certainly saw signaling by all the contenders that they would reaffirm the so-called 1992 consensus. The new chairman, Zhu Lilun, even went out and basically echoed comments by Xi Jinping that the DPP was responsible for instability in the Taiwan Strait, and that he would seek to repair relations with Beijing. So obviously, regardless of who heads the KMT, and particularly if they were to become government again, chances are the quality of the relationship between Taiwan and Japan would inevitably suffer. Another element, again, sticking to domestic politics in Taiwan, that can possibly undermine relations between Taiwan and Japan, but also Taiwan and the United States, are domestic issues such as, for example, referenda that again are orchestrated by opposition parties targeting, for example, Taiwanese imports of food products from Fukushima Prefecture, or pork products containing ractopamine from the United States. So there is quite a bit of consensus now in Taiwan that direct democracy can derail plans by the executive branch of the government in Taipei, and that it can impede bilateral initiatives. So for example, back in 2016, there were talks between Taipei and Tokyo of potentially establishing a hotline, if you will, linking the National Security Council and Tokyo with that in Taipei. But that was put on ice due to the fact that the Taiwanese government had yet to lift its ban on food products from Fukushima. We have seen similar linkage, for example, when it came to US arms sales to Taiwan, with Taiwan's refusal to lift its ban on food products from the United States, particularly beef for a number of years, and now, once again, pork products containing ractopamine. And once again, later this year, there will be a referendum that is initiated by the KMT on that issue. So these are still elements that could serve as impediments to closer ties between these three countries, but overarching those and overshadowing those is continued Chinese belligerence, which is becoming worrying enough for countries worldwide that they might be willing to overlook these little bumps in the road, if you will, such as the food issues, and work more closely with Taiwan. Other than the United States, it's unlikely that we're going to see much improvements in terms of direct military-to-military relations. United States gets away with it because it is, the primary superpower within the international community. But for other countries, even Japan, if there is direct military contact, it will likely occur behind the scenes, and not so much visibly as we have seen with the Americans. But beyond that, there's still a possibility of closer intelligence sharing, rescue at sea, Coast Guard collaboration, baby step, a gradualistic approach to building relations with Taiwan that would not only acclimatize those countries and their public to working more closely with Taiwan, but also reduce the likelihood that Beijing at some point would decide that a red line has been crossed and therefore feels compelled to punish those countries, or more likely to seek to punish Taiwan for its engagement. So all of this remains to be seen, and I will conclude here and look forward to the questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Michael, for your great presentation, for highlighting the main factors that are fueling the trilateral cooperation. The main factor is China's assertiveness. We understood that, but also the factors that are impediment and put brakes on the cooperation. So now the floor is open for the Q&A session. So do not hesitate to type your questions into the Q&A box. I have a number of questions myself, and I raised a number of them already. So I would like to point again for to some of my question, and also maybe introduce the question that we have right now on AUKUS. So the new strategic partnership, some call them alliance, but between the US, Australia, and Britain, Great Britain, and this is maybe not directly linked to the Taiwanese issue so far, but there is a question about what is your perception of the AUKUS agreement, and maybe I would be also interested to hear about what you think about any possibility of implication for the trilateral, your trilateral cooperation. Also, another question linked to that is about also the consequences for Beijing. Do you expect China to react strongly in the coming months after this AUKUS announcement? Do you expect more aggressive moves across the Taiwan Strait? It would be very interesting to get your three perspective on this, and to see if there is some differences or not. Also, another question that I have, and Michael, you pointed to the importance of the public opinion to draft the Taiwan approach, or at least the cooperation policy with other countries. And you talked a lot about how the Japanese public changed its mind and got a very much more adverse views of China. But I wanted to know what from the US perspective, what is the way, the role of the public opinion when the US government is drafting its Taiwan approach. Also, we'll see some midterm election next year. So, do you think that China and the Taiwan issue would play an important role, or not so much? Another question that I have is related to the Taiwan and China's application to the CPTPP. Michael, do you think that this would be a factor that would encourage or convince the Biden government to come back to the CPTPP deal, or do you think it's not actually relevant so much? So here are my first set of questions to you. I see that all the questions are coming in, but maybe we can make a first round very quickly, and then we'll take more questions. So maybe we turn to Professor Lai to respond first.
Thank you, Bajon. I think the AUKUS issue has some implication about Taiwan in particular, but I think it's the adoption of the Australia to change its defense strategy, so that they abruptly changed the contract with France, which they made several years ago. It reflected, first of all, the Australia's commitment to Indo-Pacific security with its military assets. That's going to be more sure. And I will say that there's the possibility of the Australia involvement should there is going to be a hard military contingency. happening in the Taiwan Straits, the Australia's possible involvement could be high, and especially when we talk about the military involvement. Because when we talk about those, and also in our conversation with some of the Japanese experts that we talked to, it seems that when the Defense Minister Kishida, he talks about the Taiwan security is Japan's security, there's a very profound implication and meaning about how Japan is thinking of its role in the Taiwan Strait contingencies. The past, we all assumed that Japan will be called upon through the US-Japan Alliance when the US will take initiative and Japan will follow. And possibly Japan, the most possible Japan's role is to provide a real support for the United States. But it seems that right now, this Japan's probably its role will be more proactive and probably will get more involved than what we traditionally we understood about the Japan's possible involvement. So the Japan on the north and Australia in the south, with their commitment, I think what it showed is that the perception about Taiwan Strait contingency or the possible war scenarios that for both countries, including the United States, they took it very, very seriously. And although there's still a debate, whether that's in Taiwan or in the wider security community regarding the possible war on Taiwan by China. And there are still people who believe that probably China would not risk taking the war on Taiwan because that will have that will be a big gamble for the Xi Jinping. But it seems that some of the people they caution about Xi Jinping is not a traditional leader. We just cannot judge the way we look at Hu Jintao to expect what Xi Jinping could do. And Xi Jinping is the one that's willing to take a big risk in order to achieve the big achievement. And that factor probably is something that we really need to take seriously into account. So I think that what came out from the AUKUS for Taiwan, rather than about the AUKUS on the security relevance to Taiwan, it's actually revealed the kind of the seriousness about the future possible war scenario on Taiwan. So that's how the several arrangements by the US-Japan and the AUKUS military cooperations, how that came out. Thank you.
Excellent, Professor Lai. Professor Kawashima, you want to step in?
Thank you, President. Since your question is 4 questions, you asked me 2 questions after my presentation. So I answered some, and I pick up some questions to answer. First of all, Chinese response or Japanese policy or Japan-Taiwan relations, it's so crucial. PLC are not so welcome Japanese approachment to Taiwan. For example, LDP and most politicians still keep the so-called 1972 framework. Recently, PLC did not claim party-to-party relations like LDP and KMT. However, suddenly, Beijing side claims Japan. It's not good. Firstly, as LDP and DPP mentioned the security and diplomacy. Secondly, Beijing said, yes, Japan really supports DPP's Taiwan independent policy. This is the question. We don't know, but yes, recently, Beijing government criticized all of DPP's policies. Everything is related to the independence. So it's a big problem. Yeah. Secondly, we have to understand the Beijing interpretation. Sino-Japanese relations is now under the normalization after the 1918, May 2018, when Xi Jinping and Abe they made the telephone meeting. That's epoch making. After this point, we don't know when the president and the Japanese prime minister made the telephone meeting. This is the first time. So we are still under the so-called improvement. So Chinese side is a little bit hesitate to criticize Japan now, a little bit hesitate. So if China, Xi Jinping really gives it up to visit Japan, it's a big problem. After the Olympic, China will start the much more aggressive policy toward Japan. Secondly, about AUKUS. Yes, from Japanese point of view, Japan really basically welcome the multilateralism of the frameworks of the security in the Indo-Pacific. So the AUKUS is one interpretation. AUKUS is the one device to get the Britain's commitment toward this region. Okay, Quad is the one device to get the India's commitment toward this region. Yes, we have such a interpretation. So we will go back French join. So Japan will basically welcome this frameworks, multilateral frameworks, or relating to the India-Pacific region security. Yes, is also related to the Taiwan problem. And about the public opinion. Yeah, that's right. It is so important. So as Michael said. However, we know its point. Most of the Japanese really like Taiwan, okay? And also pay attention to the positive attitude towards the Japanese participation and support of Taiwan at the so-called Taiwan incident. However, most of Japanese people really appreciate Taiwan's support donation as an earthquake, so that most of Japanese people cannot understand why Taiwan stops Fukushima's food import. It's a puzzle. For Japanese point of view, it's a puzzle. From the Taiwan's point of view, it's not a puzzle. But from the Japanese point of view, it's a puzzle. Because the Taiwanese people, they don't donate support Japan so well. But Taiwan stops the import of Fukushima food. Why? It's a puzzle. So this point is so crucial for Japanese politicians' mind. How do Japan support Taiwan? This is the point. Yes, and I end my answer. Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot, Professor Kawashima. We are almost at the end of our time for today, so it was very fast. So Michael, I'm now turning to you. If you can give your response to the various questions that we had. We had another question in the box about the possibility for China actually to actually invade Taiwan, or would it be too huge a price to pay for Beijing? So I think you can also address that. And after your response, I will turn to the other panelists if they have a very burning reaction, last reaction to make, and then we will end the session for today. So Michael.
Thank you. Well, since we're running a bit out of time, I'll try to be succinct. On AUKUS, this is a welcome development. I think every effort should be made to enlarge that club so as not to alienate or unduly alienate potential partners that have a stake in the region. And obviously France comes to mind. So there may have been a little bit of a mishandling, but those can be repaired so that more participants can be involved in that important initiative. As to whether Beijing would react to that initiative by ramping up pressure in the Taiwan Strait, it's certainly possible. I would say that would be self-defeating because that could very much lead to that enlargement of that club that I just mentioned, and also make that security group more focused on the Taiwan Strait than Beijing wants. So again, China has a long tradition of shooting itself in the foot and engaging in self-defeating behavior. So I do not rule out that at some point they might do something to lash out at Taiwan, but very quickly I think they would realize that was not a good idea. Japanese public perceptions, well, absolutely, those have always been warm ties. I think what has changed in recent years, certainly because of the assistance that was extended to Japan by the Taiwanese, but I would also mention that normally Japanese would think of Taiwan as, okay, a successful former colony, a nice tourist destination, a place to do business, now more and more a place from which to buy delicious fruit. But only in recent years has Taiwan become consciously, for a larger segment of the Japanese public, an issue that is relevant to their own national security. And this has long been a frustration among people in Japan, in government and think tank world. There seemed to be a disconnect between their own perceptions of Taiwan and those among the ordinary Japanese public. Now, quickly on the United States, well, you know, in any democracy, it's always easier for a government to adopt policies, particularly on foreign issues, if there is public support. And more, as we have seen, there is public support in the United States for assisting Taiwan, perhaps even sending American soldiers to help defend Taiwan. One thing that I think could be improved upon is the fact that American government support for Taiwan should not only be instrumental in that it is used to, Taiwan is used to contain China, but I think public perception should be more in terms or along the lines of something positive. The need to assist Taiwan, you know, for its own value as a democratic partner, rather than solely as an instrument or a means by which to contain China. So rather than a negative, turn that into a positive. I think doing that would probably mean that American support for Taiwan would be more durable and could carry over from one administration to another. Because otherwise, if relations with China suddenly became better, then support for Taiwan would drop. We don't want to see that. So I'll stop here. I know there's other questions, but we're out of time.
Okay, thanks a lot. So I want to know if Dr. Lai, Dr. Kawashima, do you have something else to add? Oh, no? Okay, okay. So I guess it's quite tricky. Either we will need another hour or 2 hours to continue the discussion in depth and address all the questions. But for today, we'll have to end it here. So thanks a lot to our 3 great panelists for their presentation, for the response and the good discussion. Thanks a lot to the audience to stick with us during this session, and thanks a lot to my colleague John Seaman, who set up the whole event today. So I wish you a very good day if you are in Europe, and a very good evening if you are based in Asia. And hope to see you again soon, maybe to continue and to the discussion to the end. Okay, bye-bye.